guys, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the sewing room and we are going to be adding an accessory to our ruffled laptop carrier. Now, if you've been following my channel, you probably remember that we made this ruffled case a couple weeks ago, and then we also made a tissue holder to go along with it. So I'll put links to those two videos in the description box below. They are completely free tutorials. So anyway, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you how to make a ruffled eyeglass case, and it will be perfect addition to this tote. To make our ruffled eyeglass case, we are going to need these fabric cuts, and I am making mine to coordinate with my tote. Now, I'm using a foam stabilizer, but you can use batting if you want. It is 8 inches by 8 inches. My lining piece is 8 inches by 8 inches, and my exterior piece is 8 inches by 8 inches. Then we're also going to need a piece for the ruffle, and this is 2 inches by 16 inches. We are also going to need a piece of fabric that's 2 inches by 4 inches for the D-ring that we're going to be attaching, and I'm using a 1-inch D-ring with a swivel claw hook on it. You can use any size that you have, but you'll have to adjust the fabric piece there, that 2-inch by 4-inch piece, in order to make it fit in your D-ring. And I'll hold this up for you so you can take a screenshot. That way you can know the size of the pieces that you need to cut. Okay, we're going to start off with our exterior 8 by 8 piece and our foam 8 by 8 piece. And the foam that I'm using is just plain foam, and I've had this for a long time. You can use just the plain foam, or you can use the fusible foam. This does not have any fusible stuff on any side. If you choose to use fusible foam, just make sure it only has it on one side. So instead of being able to iron this to my fabric, I will have to use a glue stick. And so I'm going to use a glue stick to get it to hold down so that I can quilt it. So I'm just going to use Elmer's. It works perfectly. It's just temporarily holding it on. It won't gum up my needle. And that way I can just hold that fabric on there without getting all the puckers. So let's lay that on there and smooth it out. And I could give it a light press at this point. I wouldn't want it to be too hot just because of that foam. And I'm ready to take this to my sewing machine and quilt it. You can do any kind of quilting. I'm just going to do a crosshatch. And here it is, all quilted. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our lining piece. And a lot of times when we quilt something, it will shrink it up. So I like to lay my lining piece back on it to see if it's about the same size still. And it didn't shrink up too much. This is not a very big piece, so it didn't shrink up too much. It's a little bit over, but that's okay. If you want to trim yours down so that it's the exact same size, go ahead and do that, but this is fine for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that lining piece and we are going to fold it in half. And I'm just making sure, because mine is directional, that mine is going the right direction. And just match up the corners. Now I'm going to get a measuring tool, and here we're going to measure down the side of it, and we're going to be on the raw edge side. So from that top corner on that raw edge side straight down, I'm going to mark mine 2.5 inches. If your glasses are smaller, you might want to decrease that distance down and maybe just 2 inches. But basically here we're going to make a curved edge. Now you can do a curved edge just freehand like this, and you're just going to start at that corner, but you want it to kind of, just like I'm doing right here, just kind of round off right there. Or what we can also do, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, we can also take an object that is round. So I'm just going to take this plate, and I don't know if it's 6-inch plate or what, but just find something that you like the look of that angle. And I'm going to use this on mine, and I'm just putting the edge of that plate on that line that I drew, and then just going all the way across the top, just making it nice and round. Now you see I do have almost half of that eyeglass carrier the full height. You want to keep the height. Then with a pair of scissors, go ahead and just keep it folded in half and just cut on that line. Now we're going to transfer it over to our outer piece, and what we'll do is we'll just open it up and lay it on top of it. And just make sure your top there is not hanging over. Pull it down if you need to. Again, here's where you'll see if your piece is a little longer than your outer piece. It'll hang down a little further, but don't worry about that. And I'm just pinning it in place so that I can trim around it. And then you can either trace it and then trim it, or you can just trim it right here. And you do want to have this cut and trimmed pretty evenly, because this is where our ruffle is going to be added. And if your lining does hang below and that's going to be bothering you, just take a ruler at this point and just trim it flush with your quilted piece. Now let's grab our D-ring and our tab fabric. And I have gone ahead and prepped this fabric. I went ahead and made my crease marks with an iron. We're going to fold it in half first, and then we're going to fold the outside edges in toward the middle. And then we're going to fold it right there where they meet. And you should have a 1-inch wide piece of fabric at this point, and it will fit that D-ring. So I just make sure it fits, and now I'm going to top stitch on the outside edges on both sides. Once you have that stitched, feed it into your D-ring, and then sew a really close stitch to the next to the edge on that raw edge. That will just hold it together. And now I have that secured on there, and it's ready to go into our sunglass case. But we're going to set it aside right now, and we're going to work on our ruffle. So grab the piece that you've cut for your ruffle. It is 2 inches by 16 inches. It is twice the width of your sunglass case. And all we need to do is just fold that piece of fabric in half, give it a press, and with your machine set to the longest stitch length, you are going to stitch 2 parallel stitch lines. And they are going to go right next to that raw edge. Now, as you can see, I have used a different color bobbin thread, and that makes it easier for me to tell which threads I'm pulling. So I'm going to be pulling the blue threads on the one side, and that was my bobbin thread. You can pull your spool thread or your bobbin thread. It doesn't matter, but just choose one. I like to take the stiletto or a needle and just pull out that first stitch, so I've got both of them right next to each other and even, and then I just gently pull, and as I do, I pull that fabric down so that it ruffles. Now you can go halfway down on one side and then halfway down on the other. And you can even mark your piece of fabric halfway down before you start doing this, so you kind of have an idea where the midway mark is. But I usually just eyeball it. But just take your time, and we do 2 stitches. That way if we break one, we still have the other one and we don't have to start all over again, because it's really easy to break one of these threads. And a lot of times if I'm doing a real long piece and I know it's going to be a lot of pulling, I will even use a heavier duty thread for making ruffles. But this is such a short piece that we don't have to worry about it. So here I am picking up these next 2 blue threads on the other side and just pulling that. And you're just going to work it until you have enough ruffle to go all around that curved edge. Now once you've got it about the right size, don't worry if it's not exact, we can adjust as we go. Now we're ready to assemble our layers. So let's take apart our lining piece and our exterior piece and set the lining piece aside. And then we are going to take and place our D-ring right next to the center. You don't want it on the center, but you want it next to it, just a little bit off to the side of the center. And I'm just going to put a basting stitch on that to hold it in place. And now we have that temporarily secured in place, and we are ready to layer our ruffle on. Now if you marked the middle, you can easily just go ahead and pin that middle to the middle of your outer fabric. If you didn't mark it, we can just eyeball it, and that's what I like to do. So I'm just cutting a few of the threads. You want to keep your pulling threads though, because you may need to be pulling some of those to adjust it. But I'm just, a lot of times the fabric will fray, and just trying to get all those little frays out of the way. So I kind of estimate where the middle was, and if you'd marked it, it would be super easy. You'd know exactly where it was. And then I find the center on my quilted piece and just kind of press it there so I can see it. And so that's where I'm going to be putting the centers and just using a pin to secure. I find that using clips on a ruffle is a little trickier because you really want it to be in place, because you're going to be pulling and adjusting those ruffles, so pins seem to work better. And then I'm just going to find where I want that edge to go. And we did not finish the edges of this, and that's because we're going to have those edges tucked in to the seam allowance, so they aren't going to be seen. So I'm just working it down. And if you need to loosen or tighten, you can just pull the strings or pull the fabric. Here is where I tuck the raw edges of the ruffle into the seam allowance. Just let those raw edges hang over that quilted piece. And you want it to go 1/4 inch away from that outside edge, because that's going to be your seam allowance, and you don't want the ruffle caught in your seam allowance. And once I feel like my raw edges are going to be concealed, I put a pin. Then I'm going to make sure the ruffle is nice and laid nice and flat, because sometimes when you're moving it, it does get a little wrinkled and out of shape. So just make sure you have it the way you want it to look. And you're going to use lots of pins. And while you're putting your ruffle on, just make sure that the raw edge of the ruffle and the raw edge of your sunglass case are matched. That way your ruffle will be nice and even. And here again, we're going to bring that raw edge of our ruffle and put it so that it's going to be in the seam allowance, and the ruffle needs to come up to about 1/4 inch away from that side edge. And I'm even kind of putting a pin there so you can see. That way it does not get in our seam allowance. And just work it until you're happy with it. And like I said, pull the threads if it needs to be tightened, pull the ruffle if it needs to be lengthened. And once you feel good about it, you are good. And there is what mine looks like. At this point, I like to go ahead and baste it in place instead of putting the lining on it now. That way I can see what I'm doing and I can see where the ruffle is. So go ahead and just put a basting stitch all the way around that raw edge. Now it is basted in place and we can cut our threads. We won't be using them anymore. And we can also turn it over and we can trim off anything that's hanging over that edge. Our raw edges from our ruffle are hanging over, so we can trim those down at this point. And once you have it sewn down, now we'll take our lining piece. And right sides together, we are going to layer them right on top of each other. And here you can use clips or you can use pins, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to use some pins and clips. Now we're only going to be sewing that top raw edge, the part that has the ruffle on it right now. So with your sewing machine, you are going to sew 1/4 inch from the edge all the way around that curved piece. And we have it all stitched right there. And now it's fun to kind of open it up and take a peek and see if everything looks all right. So just kind of flip it out and make sure you've got everything caught, all your ruffle is caught. Now you might see some basting stitches, and that's okay, we're going to get rid of those in a minute, but just check it out, and then we're going to kind of notch this rounded edge. And we just take a pair of scissors and we just cut little snips. And be sure you do not cut through your stitch line. Just little stitches all the way around. That way it won't pucker on us. Now at this point, I like to go ahead and open it all the way up and flip it inside out. And just make sure it's not puckering anywhere and everything lays nice and flat. Now, if you wanted to, you could do a top stitch right now, but I think it's easier to do it after it's sewn together. So we're going to wait and do the top stitch in a minute. But right now it looks good. Again, I do see some of my basting threads there, but don't worry, we can pick those out and they'll come out real easily after we get it all done. So now let's flip it back. So now we're going to be matching up the raw edges of our lining piece and the raw edges of our quilted piece together. just like this. And remember, you have your D-ring in there, and so just be careful that it's not flipping around and getting in your way. And just match up those corners. And I like to pin. You can pin or clip. And just make sure that you are matching where the exterior edges meet and the lining pieces meet. Make sure that those corners are matched up nice and straight. And you want to make sure your ruffle is going toward your quilted fabric. And once you have everything matched up, we are just going to do a 1/4 inch seam all the way around, but once you get to your lining piece, just leave that end open. And now that it's stitched all the way around except for the opening at the bottom of our lining piece, we need to trim our corners so that we don't have too much bulk in that corner. And make sure you don't cut through your seam. And then I also like to cut right there at that corner. But again, don't cut through your seam. Now all we need to do is turn it right side out. And just be gentle, you don't want to pull any of your seams out. The foam quilted portion is bulky, but it will go through quite easily. You can grab hold of the ruffle, you can grab hold of that D-ring, and that helps you get it through too. Now I like to take something to turn my points out, and this is just my little flamingo point turner. And it's nice because it's not too sharp, so I don't worry about it poking a corner out. And just work up that fabric. And I sometimes find that when I'm working with thick fabrics or quilted fabrics, taking a pin or my stiletto and just gently grabbing hold of the point of that corner and just gently pulling it. You want to be careful depending on the fabric you're using, but I find that that helps pop those corners out a little bit better. And then just work your seam out, and you can do that with the iron too. But it's all looking good right here. And then we can just take our lining piece and push it down in there and make sure we're happy with the way it's laying. And if everything is laying nicely, and just check it carefully, then we can go ahead and close up that hole. And all I do is turn under that raw edge about 1/4 inch. You can do a little more if you want. And once I have it turned under, I'll give it a good press. And then I will just stitch it 1/4 inch, or just a top stitch, I guess, on that opening right there. And it is all stitched, and we are just about done. Let's flip that back inside. And now I am just going to do a top stitch all around the edge there, and here I'm just pinning it so that my seam allowance is going down toward the quilted fabric. And now, so that my fabric on my lining does not come up, I'm just going to put a few pins to hold my lining away from my seam that I'm going to be putting in. just trying to keep them out of the way of the needle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I am going to stitch a top stitch right there, all the way around that edge. And here it is, all finished, and I think it looks so cute. Our top stitch looks good. It makes the ruffle stand straight up. I think that is adorable. Let's test it out. I think I've got a pair of readers right here. And let's just put those in there. And they're smaller. The readers are smaller. So as you can see, there's plenty of room in there. And that works great for the trendy, larger glasses. If your glasses are smaller, you can always cut 7-inch squares instead of the 8. Just reduce the size. Now let's attach it to our laptop case and see what it looks like. Remember, we have these D-rings on the side that we can easily attach our case to. So I think that looks really cute. I think it goes perfectly with it. We can do our tissue holder on one side, our sunglass case on the other. We could even hook our sunglass case to the zipper pull, and that would work as well. This would make a perfect gift for a new college student or somebody who would like to have something to carry their laptop in. I believe this is a perfect gift for that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you get a chance to make your own ruffled eyeglass case. It is a lot of fun and it's not very hard to make. And here we have both of our accessories on. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to like and share, and I hope to see you back here next time. Bye-bye.